The paper concludes with a proposal for a new Bulgarian translation and reflects on a dynamic internet paradigm, which may serve as an adequate solution to the problem at hand. Before proceeding to the heart of the study, it will be appropriate to give some information about the place where most events discussed in the paper have taken place. The country of Bulgaria is located on the Balkan Peninsula, bordering Romania, Yugoslavia, Macedonia, Greece, Turkey, and the Black Sea. A population of 8 million lives in a land about the size of the state of Tennessee. This is where three continents, Europe, Asia, and Africa, three major religions, Christianity, Islam, and Judaism, 10 Balkan states, and over 100 ethnic minorities have historically clashed with their cultural, economical, and political ambitions. In this context, around the 9th century, Bulgaria was introduced to Christianity. The 9th century on the Balkan Peninsula was characterized by the strong Christian mission attempts on behalf of the Byzantine Empire toward the Slavic nations. Around 880 AD, the missionary brothers Cyril and Methodius were successful in the development of a 38-symbol alphabet which was called Glagolica. The alphabet was used in the translation of the Bible into the language of the Slavic tribes belonging to the First Bulgarian Kingdom. By 855, Clement, a student of Cyril and Methodius, perfected the Glagolica into a set of characters called the Cyrillic alphabet. Their work was used by the Bulgarian King Boris for the Christianization of Bulgaria in 863. Some argue 864. The use of the newly developed alphabet for the translation of the Bible into the Slavic language was revolutionary. Christian faith spread rapidly through the land, revitalizing spiritual, economical, and political life, and setting the stage for the golden century of Bulgarian culture. Christian Bulgaria occupied a large part of the Balkan Peninsula until 1396, when it fell under Ottoman dominion. The Turkish yoke over Bulgaria lasted nearly half a millennium. While the Christian faith of the Bulgarian people was strongly persecuted, it remained the only protector of the Bulgarian ethnicity. It is not surprising then that through all these times, the text of the Slavic Bible was carefully kept, copied, and circulated. Now, by the 19th century, the Bulgarian language had departed dramatically from the old Church Slavic to a form much closer to the modern Bulgarian vernacular. The linguistic vocal system had changed drastically, and the alphabet contained fewer sounds, as reform reduced the number of letters from 44 to 32. Because of the language barrier, the use of the Slavic Bible had been limited to clerical and liturgical use only, thus remaining restricted to the common reader. And although Bulgaria had accepted Christianity as its official religion in 863, a Bible in the Bulgarian vernacular had not yet been translated. This event would dramatically change the outlook of the Bulgarian Renaissance. In 1806, the ex-bishop of Vratsa, Sophrony, published a book under the title of Kyriakogromion, a compilation of Sunday and holiday sermons translated from Greek. It became the first modern Bulgarian book, and in his edition, Sophrony included the translation of some scripture references in what he called a simple Bulgarian language that was understood by the people. Such modifications of scriptures were unprecedented, resulting from the noted difference between the Church Slavic used in liturgy and the spoken Bulgarian language. Its occurrence indicated the inability of the Bulgarian people to understand the Church Slavic translation of the Bible. Meanwhile, in 1804, the British and Foreign Bible Society was incorporated in London, and 9 years later, its extension, the Russian Bible Society, was founded in St. Petersburg with the blessing and personal approval of Tsar Alexander. Initiators of this project were missionaries Peterson and Pinkerton. This society would be the first one to investigate ways to translate the Bible into modern Bulgarian language. In 1818, Pinkerton had established contact with the Bulgarian population on the Balkan Peninsula and suggested that the society consider translating the Bible into Bulgarian language. Pinkerton learned that a certain priest by the name of Theodosi of the monastery of Bistrica near Bucharest had already begun working on such a translation. It is now apparent that Theodosi started his work as early as 1819, and in 2 years' time he had completed the translation of the Gospel of Matthew into Bulgarian. In February of 1822, 5,000 copies of his translation were approved for printing in St. Petersburg. Unfortunately, the translation was poor in grammar and greatly influenced by earlier Slavic versions. Some places in the text remained identical to the Slavic source, and doubts about the accuracy of the translation were raised prior to its publication. Upon Peterson's recommendation in 1823, only 2,000 copies of the Gospel of Matthew were printed. This Gospel was being mystically misplaced or destroyed, except with one remark. In 1903, Yastremirsky, a Russian bibliographer, discovered several defective copies of Theodosius' translations of Matthew containing only chapter 10 through the end. We believe that there is a copy in Oxford, if I'm not mistaken, and I'm trying to acquire a copy of it, which is extremely hard for the time being. The search for Bulgarian translation was continued by Benjamin Barker and Reverend H.D. Leaves, missionaries to Bulgaria, who traveled through Bulgaria extensively from 1823 to 1826, looking for an appropriate person to serve as a translator. While the agents of the Bible Societies were searching for a capable translator, an independent attempt to publish a Bulgarian Bible occurred. Peter Sapunov and his brother Seraphim published the 4 Gospels in modern Bulgarian at the Bucharest Metropolitan Press in Wallachia, today's Romania. Greek, Romanian, and Slavic texts were used as source for the translation. Seraphim knew both Greek and Slavic, but in some cases preferred Slavic words instead of Bulgarian. The final version was completed in Eastern Bulgarian dialect before 1820, but the printed edition was not finished until almost a decade later due to financial difficulties. In 1828, 1,200 copies of the 4 Gospels were finally printed. Unfortunately, Sapunov's translation also contained a great number of linguistic errors and was not well received by the Bulgarian population. The circulation was further limited due to the title page, which had an inscription of the coming of the army of the mighty empire of all Russia. Sapunov personally distributed 400 copies over the next 6 years, and then Benjamin Barker of the British Informed Bible Society purchased the remaining 800 copies. Then in 1835, Barker met in the town of Gabrovo with Neofit Petrov Rilsky, a Bulgarian Orthodox monk, who was recommended by the Archbishop of Turnovo Ilarion to complete a new Bulgarian translation of the New Testament. Neofit accepted the offer and began working immediately. The Gospels of Matthew and Mark were completed by November of that same year, and the draft of the first 3 Gospels was ready by December. In May of 1836, Neofit sent half of the translated New Testament into Bulgarian to Barker, who was in Smyrna, projecting that the full translation would be ready no later than September, but on September 15, the Archbishop Ilarion ordered him to stop the translation immediately. The correspondence between Neofit and Barker ceased for 2 years. The Constantinople Patriarch instructed the destruction of all copies of the partial Protestant translation, which were apparently in circulation at that time. Meanwhile, Benjamin Barker supplied the press of A. Damian, also known as A. Damyanov, with Slavic type for printing. During this time, the Gospels and Acts were printed consecutively in 1838 and in 1839, and then frequently reprinted. In the beginning of 1838, Neofit again established contact with Barker, and by April of that same year, he sent the complete translation of the New Testament to Smyrna. Apparently, regardless that he was forbidden to translate, he continued his work and had it ready. At the request of Benjamin Barker in 1838, Dr. Elias Griggs examined the first edition of Neofit Rilsky's translation. Griggs, on his part, used the help of his friend and publisher, Konstantin Fotinov. In May of 1838, Barker reported to Neofit that the New Testament was finally in print, and on October 7th, he sent the first page of the printed translation to Neofit, asking for his confirmation on the chosen font. In 1840, 5,000 copies of the first complete translation of the New Testament in Bulgarian language were printed in Smyrna by the British Informed Bible Society. The title page read, "The New Testament of our Lord Jesus Christ, now newly translated from Slavic into Bulgarian language by Neofit, monk of Rila, and diligently examined and approved by the very consecrated and wise Metropolitan of Turnovo Ilarion in Smyrna, in the press of A. Damyanov and Company, 1840. By October, well over 1,500 copies were distributed. In 1841, an agent of the American board recorded that 2,000 New Testaments were sold in less than 1 week. By 1844, more than 3,000 additional copies had been distributed among the Bulgarians. Now, I know that any speech teacher would have told me to use an image when I list all these numbers, and I guess the proper image showed that the New Testaments were distributed by the truckloads, except they didn't have trucks at the time. But just an icebreaker here, because I see I'm losing you. Anyway, the numbers are very important, at least for me, because apparently the interest was great. That's what we're trying to say. We're quoting the proper numbers that the missionaries so important to record in their records. The Greek Patriarchy reacted immediately. Orthodox metropolitans throughout Bulgaria were organized in campaign to find and destroy every copy of the so-called Protestant New Testament. The Bulgarian population, however, refused to give up the new translation and boycotted the Orthodox campaign almost in every city. The persecution from the Greek Patriarchy only elevated the interest of the Bulgarian people, and the New Testament completely sold out. A second edition was printed in Smyrna in 1850 with very few corrections. Another one followed in 1853 with 15,000 copies in print. This New Testament was revised and reprinted a total of 9 times. By 1840, the Bulgarian language had dramatically changed, and the Eastern Turnovo dialect was widely adopted, while even in the Western Macedonian parts of the Balkan Peninsula. Since the New Testament had been earlier translated in the Western dialect, a revision was a must. Konstantin Fotinov worked on the later edition along with Dr. Elias Riggs, and on the translation of the Old Testament in Bulgarian between 1851 and 1858. An edition of the Psalms, translated by Fotinov, was published in Smyrna in 1855, followed later by the publication of Proverbs, Ecclesiastes, and the Pentateuch, all done in Constantinople. After Fotinov unexpectedly died in 1858, Riggs invited the Bulgarian teacher Christodul Kostovic to help him with the work. Early in 1860, the first volume of the Bulgarian Old Testament was published. In 1862, Long and Riggs visited the noted Bulgarian writer and poet Petko Rachov Slavekov in his home in Travnik. Slavekov also agreed to help with the translation and immediately began work on revising the Office's New Testament. In the same year, the second volume of the Old Testament in Bulgarian was printed and distributed. Dr. Albert Long joined efforts to revise the New Testament into the Eastern dialect in 1863 and later assisted with the translation of the Old Testament. The revision of the Old Testament was completed on October 10, 1863. The third volume of the Old Testament was completed and published in the first half of 1864. By 1865, the revision of the New Testament was completed, and its new edition was published next year. By that time, the printed edition of the New Testament and published portions of the Old Testament were much in demand. Over 5,000 copies of the New Testament sold out. In the middle of 1867, the first 3 volumes of the Old Testament also were sold out, and a new edition was put to print. In 1865, the final revision of the New Testament was completed. A revision of the Old Testament follows to synchronize the text with the current language. After more than 12 years of consistent labor, the complete Bulgarian translation of the Bible was published in Constantinople in June of 1871. The decision to publish the Bible into the Eastern dialect was the historical factor determining the departure of the modern Bulgarian language from all other dialects and adopting the Eastern Thracian one. The translation came to be known as the Tsarigrad edition or the Constantinople edition. The first copy of the Bulgarian Bible received from the binders was laid on the table of the Mission of European Turkey in Iski Zagreb, today's Star Zagor in southern Bulgaria. Due to its popularity, the whole Bible was reprinted in 1874, and several reprints followed afterwards. By 1879, the total number of printed and distributed Bulgarian Bibles by the so-called Bible House in Constantinople was well over 6,000 volumes. In the 20th century, the story of the Bulgarian Bible continued in 4 chronological periods. Toward modernism from 1900 to 1914, modernism from 1914 to 1944, communism from 1944 to 1989, and post-communism from 1989 to present. The first period was characterized by frequent publications of the Bulgarian Protestant Bible with only minor revisions. The British and Foreign Bible Society printed a parallel New Testament with English on one side and Bulgarian on the other in Berlin in 1909, the Gospel of Luke in London 1912, separate editions of the New Testament and the whole Bible in Constantinople in 1912, and concluded the period with an edition of the Psalter in London in 1913. The modern period began after World War I with the 1918 special edition of the 1912 revision of the Bible published by the American Bible Society in New York. I was fortunate to purchase a copy of that on the internet for less than $40 last year, and I brought it today if you want to see it, but it's probably the best Bulgarian Bible I've ever seen, with the golden edges, with the golden inscription, leather, and in very mint condition. A revision of the four Gospels that was started in 1913 was printed at the Predvorna Pechatnica Royal Press in Sofia by the British and Foreign Bible Society in 1921. And in 1924, a revision of the complete Bulgarian Bible was printed, perhaps following the Revised Standard Version. From 1925 to 1926, the 8 volumes of the Constantinople Bible were printed in one volume by the New York Bible Society. An edition of the Revised New Testament in 1933, and the Bible in 1940 by the British and Foreign Bible Society followed. The 1940 edition contained only minor changes from the 1924 revision. These 2 copies would become the authoritative Bible for the Bulgarian Protestant Church in its underground existence during the 45 years of the communist regime. By the way, these particular revisions, especially in 1924-1940, are still used in the church in Bulgaria. The communist regime in Bulgaria limited the translation, printing, and circulation of the Bibles. Yet the Bible was printed abroad and smuggled in Bulgaria. Among the many known and unknown complete and partial editions are the 1951 Geneva Topographical Bulgarian Bible by the UBS, United Bible Society, the 1951 New York edition of the Bulgarian Bible by the American Bible Society, a London edition in 1965, 1967 New York edition of the Bulgarian New Testament, and then the complete Bible again in New York in 1980. With the fall of the Berlin Wall in 1989, a number of mission organizations and publishing houses attempted to provide a new translation of the Bible in Bulgarian. In 1993, a revised Protestant New Testament was printed by the Variant Publishers, a Bulgarian publishing company. A complete Orthodox edition was published in 1995, followed by a number of partial and complete topographical reprints and revised compilations of the Protestant text. Several among them deserve to be mentioned, including 3 of them, which are revisions of the complete Bible published by Variant in 2003, Bulgarian Bible Society 2000, 2002, and then every year until 2005, and the Bible League. Additionally, in 2002, the Bulgarian Bible Society published a new translation, so-called New Translation of the New Testament. Although this edition was announced as consensual to all Christian denominations in Bulgaria, its text was strongly influenced by Eastern textual tradition, largely contested by major known manuscripts.